Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Hi, thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad that you clicked on our link and are joining us for this podcast. I'm very happy to have today as a guest Inderjit Sidhu. She goes by Indy, who's got over 25 years experience in the world of business immigration. And you may ask yourself, why is business immigration relevant for technology companies? Well, it is for a couple of reasons, because sometimes technology companies, particularly outside the United States, need to bring in experts and senior executives to do things in the United States. So that's an immigration issue. And then also, increasingly, there's some incredibly smart people who are not US citizens who can contribute greatly to technology companies here in the United States. And they need help in order to establish their legal presence here in the United States. Indy is very experienced, has worked with startup companies, IT, biotechnology, pharma, high net worth individuals, elite talent. That's a spectral class in the immigration law. And also, if you think about it, creative artists who aren't necessarily American citizens, who come here for shows and for other performances, as well as professional athletes. Before starting her own practice, Indy was a corporate counsel for IT computer software development companies, and has a real sense of what businesses need from a very practical level. So I'm so pleased that Indy is with us today. Hi, Indy. How are you today?
Hi, Phil. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this. I'm really excited to have a discussion with you and, hopefully help educate our, business entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you. That's certainly what we try to do. The areas of law are many and varied. And I just like to ask you, how did you choose immigration law? Why was the thing that drew you into law?
So it's one of those areas of law that inherently it was just part of my own journey. And what I mean by that is, so I'm a Canadian. I went to law school in the States, and, Canadians, everybody has this, misconception that at Canada, you don't need a visa to work in the US, right? Or you don't need a visa to come study here. And that's not true. It's not, if you're not a green card holder or a US citizen, or have some other immigration benefit, you have to have a visa, right? So the, figuring out my own journey was helpful. And then right after I graduated, I worked with, after I graduated, the companies that I became general counsel to IT companies. And that's how it began. It was general counsel, but the IT companies really needed in-house counsel specifically for their talent. It was around Y2K. So, all companies were rushing to ensure that they were Y2K compliant, right? So, and that's when we really saw like a huge impact in terms of business immigration. It's always existed. These visas have always existed, but you saw more and more companies utilizing them. And I was corporate counsel for 13 to 15 years with software companies in the U.S., in New Jersey, Michigan, and then when I went on my own solo, that need continued to be there. But the years that I was corporate counsel, it exposed me to employment law issues that may arise. You know, we touched on IP issues. I'm not an IP attorney. I'm not a technology attorney, but you know, general counsel, you sort of touch on a number of things. But the immigration aspect, it was very focused, and it just was it's a very highly niche practice. But part of the whole getting into immigration was my own journey from a Canadian to a U.S. citizen.
Well, let's take a couple of practical cases that may affect some of our viewers. Suppose, and this is kind of a case that comes close to home because I have clients who are outside the United States who set up a footprint in the United States. And then what typically happens is that senior executives come over in a sales role, or they may have technical people who come over. Can you tell us what kind of immigration issues arise in those cases, and what kind of permissions are available to, say, the senior executives or people with special technical competence that come perhaps for a time, perhaps for a year or more to the United States? How does that work?
Those are really great questions. So, you know, an overseas company who's opening up offices or wants to migrate or transfer employees to the US to help with the developing the US market, those clients, you know, those companies, one of the best vehicles is what's called an L1A petition, right? And I've worked with a number of clients where that had, you know, the L1A has been utilized. But the thing is, we don't always start off with it being the, you know, the L1A is the route to go. And what do I mean by that? So I had a client several years ago. They were looking for they came in asking about an EB5 type
Now,
of
what's
petition.
the E5?
EB5 is an investor visa where an individual invests up to 800,000 or 1.05 million in a project or business enterprise, and you know and that business enterprise has to create at least 10 US jobs. Now 800,000 is a lot of money, right? So as we spoke with them, they were like, well, we're thinking that possibly even an EB5. They didn't want to spend the 800,000, and they had already purchased a building and thought that that would be what they could use for the EB5 visa, and it isn't. It's very clear what type of business enterprise can be utilized for that visa, right?
Mhm.
So that was when we had that discussion. That wasn't a viable option for them. The next question was, what about an E2 visa? Now, E2 visa, I know, Phil, you're going to ask, what's an E2 visa? E2 visa
Because I'm not an immigration specialist like you.
right. Well, the E2 visa it's a treaty visa. Not every country is, you know, eligible, or nationals of those countries or citizens of those countries are eligible for an E2 visa. The US has to have a bilateral agreement with that country. And if that bilateral agreement does exist, then those individuals could, under an investor visa, come to the US, invest in a business enterprise, and begin that path, right? There isn't a minimum employment requirement, but there's this catch-all phrase of it has to be substantial investment, right? And substantial investment is never defined because it's going to depend on the type of business.
Are
Some
there which particular countries have that special deal of having those? Do our friends in the United Kingdom and my old home country, Ireland, have any draw on that?
Yes, they do. The United Kingdom and Ireland do have bilateral agreements with the U.S. So an E2 visa is an option for them, right? But when we spoke with the client, again, it was that may not have been the best one for them. They were really interested in the E2, but while we were talking to them, we found out that no, they actually have. They've been in operation. They've had a business enterprise, that it has been profitable, or it has revenue for the last 5 years. And that particular client, their objective was to obtain a green card, right? And E2, you don't have that path. So and it was the CEO that we were talking to and speaking to. So in that, because, the L1A and the objective was a green card, we looked at what the end goal objective was and began the L1A process for them.
All right. Just for our listeners who may not be aware of it, the green card is an authorization to be a permanent resident of the United States, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
if you have the green card, then you can go out of the United States, come back into the United States freely, and there are no timing requirements on that. There's not a maximum amount of time that you can be in the United States if you have the green card.
Right. So, right. The green card is it's for 10 years. You do have to renew it after 10 years. But in that 10-year period, if you wanted to at some point become a U.S. citizen, that's the pathway to citizenship. You have to have the green card before you can apply for U.S. citizenship. But going back to Phil, the L1A, right? I just want to explain what is the L1A. The L1A is an intra-company transferee visa. So it allows for a company to transfer their executives from the overseas branches to the U.S. branch.
Now, when you say executives, does it have to be a C-suite, a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, or something like that?
It can be, yeah, well, or senior manager. So it should be C-suite or senior manager. When I say senior manager, it's a manager. It has, has oversight of a team of at least 3 to 5 people. Right.
I see.
So there's the executive within the L1A. There's the executive, or there's which is the C-suite, as you stated, or there's the manager. They have a managerial role. Okay, so and this client, she was the CEO, she was the founder. They wanted to move to the U.S., and we were able to. And the L1A wasn't, and that's the incredible thing, is the L1A wasn't even on their radar. It was, they did not. So the L1A we filed, we got it approved for 3 years. Maximum for the L1A is 7 years, but the first initial term is for 3 years. And late last year, we also filed for their permanent residency green card. So yeah, so they're and all of this in terms of a timeline, Phil, it was within a year and a half. We have been able to take them from what are we going to do? What's the best visa for us, to having that L1A, about to get their green card, and down the road, if they wanted to, the citizenship, and they don't have those restrictions anymore. They won't have those restrictions, right? And the other beauty of it is, yes, she's the founder, but you can, open up, invest in other companies, expand your business enterprise with that green card without having the restrictions that you have to be an employee of that, of company A that opened up. So if you to have a completely different business model or enterprise, which is supportive of the first business, you could do that as a founder without having that company now having to file for a another visa for you. And they wouldn't be able to do an L1 in that situation, right? Because
Yes,
they're not employees of that new company wasn't an overseas company.
I see.
It's
So
like
it's
really
really
interesting.
an opportunity to expand their business. So
Yeah.
let me just take a minute here to introduce our viewers to Crowley Law. We are a boutique law firm that is really passionate about helping founders in the life sciences and other technologies realize their dreams. For us, it's taking great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside, or from the garage, or these days from the dining room table to the marketplace, where they can enrich the lives of thousands or millions of people. And we have a group of really experienced practical lawyers that help companies, and particularly founders, navigate their way through. Sometimes it may seem like a minefield of potential problems to get from the development of their technology to actually marketing it. We have a great uh, body of free resources on our website, crowleylawllc.com. And I invite you to go out there. In addition, if you have additional questions, you can get additional information. And if you put the word Sidhu, Indy's last name, Sidhu, in the subject line at info@crowleylawllc.com, we'd be happy to give you a complimentary conversation with one of our team members about some of the issues that are affecting you and your business, because we're here to help. And Indy, let's go back to you.
Okay.
With respect to the change in the immigration law, we hear a lot about immigration on the civil side. What changes have you seen, either to streamline the business immigration process or to make it more complicated, over the past several years?
Well, one of the biggest changes, or I guess upgrades might be a better term, is that the Immigration Service is trying to make everything online, right? So they're slowly encouraging online submissions. Now, the issue with that is there's a cap in terms of size. I think it's like 25 MB, and there are a lot of files when it comes to immigration files. They're very documentation heavy, right? And it's documentation heavy. We guide our clients through those documents. So I think at some point the Immigration Service is going to have to take a look at that when it comes to the online submissions. Processing timeframes, I've seen has been a big improvement. So, for example, a L1A that I spoke about, right? Normally, or I'd say 2 years ago, it was taking, if you didn't file it in premium processing means more fees to the Immigration Service. But if you filed it under regular process, it could take anywhere from 5, 6, 7 months. And and that processing time frame has come down to about 2.5 to 3 months, right?
Right.
Which is incredible. But the thing is that's a sliding scale in terms of processing timeframes. But even H-1Bs, and we didn't talk about H-1Bs, but those are the work visas for individuals who we term as elite talent. I term them as elite talent because the minimum, it's not the minimum requirement for those type of positions is does the position require a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, right? So minimum requirement is you have to have a bachelor's degree. And it can't be a 3-year bachelor's degree. It has to be a 4-year bachelor's degree or an equivalency to a 4-year US bachelor's degree.
So
That's
it sounds like it's a lot less than being a Nobel laureate to be elite talent. What other qualifications are there?
well, that's the biggest qualification when it comes to the individual, right? But from a company perspective, so for it, so when it comes to company, when you're filing an H-1B, there's a number of considerations that they'll have to use and evaluate. One of them is that they have to offer a competitive salary, right? So what do I mean by competitive salary? And we will, with our clients, we use the Department of Labor's database and what their wage surveys are, because if the government's publishing it, if I have requests for additional information, I can at least cite to, we got it from you. So if you got an issue, you got to look at yourself. We got it from you, right?
Right.
And that's been an argument that's worked very well for me in the past. So, so that's why we continue with that. So there's a salary requirement. What we saw in the previous administration was typically an entry level position, which is a level 1, right? There was pushback on the salary that was being offered. And so we had, when we saw that there were a couple of times we were getting a pushback, a request for additional information, why, the client was offering XYZ salary, we just went back to our clients and said, you need to take a look at to see if the offered salary can be at least a level 2. And that's how we adjust, is when we see a pattern happening, it may not be something that, has been published, within an organization. It's just when I see a pattern, we try to adjust with, and make sure that our clients see it too, right? Because we want them to be in a proactive, not a reactive mode, if that makes sense.
What are some of the mistakes that companies make that get in the way of their success in this area? I think people would like to know the sorts of things that they should avoid doing when they're making their applications to Immigration Naturalization Service.
Well, I think when it comes to an E2 or an L1, which is the intercompany transferee or investment type of visa, having a business plan, I think, is really important. Or, if you have an internal document, I think that's really important in terms of, and when I say internal document, I mean, have you done a market analysis of, the industry or the market that you're going to be entering into, right? Because that's going to show roadmap for the Immigration Service that, yes, we've got a 3 to 5 year plan. Our initial investment is going to create, and I'm just going to, use this as an example, 250,000 in revenue. Year 2, we anticipate that revenue is going to be, and when I say gross, I mean not gross revenue and net revenue, but I usually use gross revenue. Gross revenue is increasing to 750,000, right? It should be you need to be able to establish progression. And how is your business going to grow? Right? That's always important. Like, you can have the qualifications, but if we can't show how we anticipate is our business plan to make it grow, that will impact. I think websites is another place where I see, those are easy fixes, where I see that sometimes, a lot of time isn't spent on websites.
I see. So it's important to the INS to see that you have a website for your business.
Well, so, in my opinion, when you have a website, it shows that you have to have a digital presence, right? A digital presence now, it's a minimum requirement for the business, and the digital presence explains what the business is, what the intent is, who are the founders or the management team. It helps to support what we are putting into the petition when it comes to preparing it.
All right. What's the most interesting and exciting immigration case that you've had in your long career in immigration law?
Um, one of the I, I would say it was a stressful, but it was also um, it was extremely rewarding. Was I had a creative artist who this was around COVID, right? It was still around 2021.
Right.
So the consulates were opening up or were not opening, right? They were opening up though, but they were opening up for special cases, right? So they weren't issuing visas, and they weren't issuing appointments, and so this particular situation came to me. The client was having a hard time obtaining a what's called an O1 visa, and that's for uh, individuals with extraordinary ability in the arts, the sciences, business, athletics. So he had an approved O1 petition, so we have an approval notice, but he wasn't able to, and his visa had already expired in his passport, so that needed to be extended. And with this client, he was being told to go travel to a third party. And incidentally, this client was from the UK. He was being told to travel to a third party country, right? A third country, and he wasn't even sure if they would process the visa. And so I had been brought in to see what we could do. And it was a really interesting experience because not, of course I was working with the client, I was working with his team. I worked with, I obtained congressional assistance, and I was working with the consulate. So we had, and it was managing all of these different um, organizations and individuals so that we could put everything together and be able to get the visa that we wanted. And we were under a time crunch because uh, this creative artist was part of the writing team. And so the writing team for the upcoming season was going to get impacted.
I see.
And right. So it was it was putting everything together as fast as possible in order for us to be able to meet that objective. And part of it is you just, and I know, Phil, you've done it as well. You pull up your sleeves and you do what you need to for the client, right? And yeah, I mean, you take on their stress so that they're not stressed and they're happy. They don't know what may go on in the back end, right? But that's why they have us to take care of it, right?
Right. Well, Indy, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Why don't you give our viewers your contact information so that if they have questions about immigration law matters, they can contact you and you can help them negotiate all these issues the way you've successfully done it for your clients over the years.
Okay, thank you. So the website is www.indysidhu.com. That's INDYSIDHU. And a direct email can be sent to me at isidhu@indysidhu.com. Again, my name that's in the header identifier. That's always a good way to reach out to me, and we'll schedule a call to talk about if you have any current issues, you're thinking about coming into the US, and you've got executives who you're looking at possibly transferring so that they can start coming into the US market, setting up operations. That's where Phil comes in with setting up the operations. We'll help facilitate your core team coming in as needed.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much. And please remember that we have a great deal of free resources out at crowleylawllc.com that are waiting for you. We're focused on innovators we really enjoy working with founders and people who have great IP. So with that, I'll end today's session and wish all of you great success in bringing great ideas to the marketplace. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that, the US there's a lot of opportunity here in the US.
Thank you, Indy.
You're welcome.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, crowleylawllc.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.